Hello again, friends. So now I'm gonna make sourdough discard cinnamon rolls by request. Seems like once a week or so someone says, can you make cinnamon rolls? So they're pretty easy to do. It does take a little bit of time because you have to let it rise for 4 or 5 hours. So in the bowl I have my flour, which is 3.5 cups of all-purpose flour. I use King Arthur organic unbleached for pretty much everything that calls for all-purpose flour. And then in the little bowl, I have 1 beaten egg. I have a 1/4 cup of sugar. I'm going to put in a 1/4 cup of unsalted butter and a 1/2 cup of warmed milk. And we're going to stir that together and gradually add it to the dry ingredients. So we're going to add, I just dropped my bookmark into my bowl. All right, we're going to get that out of the way. We're going to add the butter. And we're going to add the warm milk. That was a 1/2 cup. Stir that together a little to incorporate the sugar. And I also want to add a cup of discard. This called for room temperature discard in this recipe. It does grow when it is room temperature, so usually for a cup I'll put in like 3/4 of a cup of discard from the refrigerator. And by the time it gets to be room temperature, it has usually grown to a cup, which is what I need for this recipe. A lot of the recipes that I use call for a cup. Okay, there we have that. We're gonna mix that together and then incorporate it into the dry ingredients. That out of the way. Give this a little stir. Okay, good to go. Now I'm going to dump probably about half of this in here. And we'll mix it up. I can still smell the scones that were cooking earlier. Scones never were really one of my favorite things. They seem a little dry to me normally. I'm thinking if I would mix together a little bit of glaze and put on top. I know they wouldn't be as healthy, but they'd be delicious. Barry likes to put a little bit of butter on his. All right, a little bit more to put in here. Scrape out the bowl so we get all the goodness. Okay, now we'll stir this up again. And I always end up at the end just getting in there with my hands. It's just much easier. Okay, wipe off the spoon. Whoops. I just flicked a big chunk onto my floor over there. As you can see, I'm not the neatest cook. I got my bowl scraper. This thing is invaluable. Scrape down the sides. Now I'm just gonna put a little bit of flour on the counter so I'm ready, because my hands will be quite messy by the time I'm done. I get in with one hand. I usually try to keep this one for dry stuff. So I'm just gonna get in here and kind of knead this all together to get the flour mostly incorporated as well as I can before I dump it out onto the surface of the counter. It cooled off a lot today, so instead of going out and trying to find some things to harvest in the garden, I decided to use up my 2 cups of discard that I had in the refrigerator. I never seem to have enough discard because I like to bake. Bread is kind of secondary. We have enough bread. When I make bread, I get 3 loaves. So I have enough pretty much to last for a couple of weeks. I usually throw one in the freezer for later if I have room in the freezer. All right, this is not all together yet, but I'm gonna dump it out on the counter because it's just easier sometimes to get everything to go together if it's not in the bowl. Get rid of that. Okay, now we're gonna squish this all together and try to get the dough to a smooth consistency. It'll take 4 or 5 hours for this to raise. I want to knead for about 10 minutes. I usually set a timer. I'll just look at my watch this time. Squeeze everything together. And when this is a good consistency, I'll stick it in a greased bowl and put a cover on it and just let it sit there for 4 hours or so. If I want to bake these in the morning, I'll go ahead and get the log rolled out with all the cinnamon and stuff in it and get that ready to go. I'll put it in the pan, and when it comes time to let them raise for that, I'll just put them in the refrigerator. Let's see, how many hours does it say? 1 to 2 hours for the second rise. Okay, let's get the rest of this dry ingredients all incorporated. This is a kind of stiff dough. Almost feels like a pie dough. And it literally does take about 10 minutes before you can get everything all incorporated. And it's a nice smooth dough. Just keep scooping in all the crumbs. And I can feel it starting to all come together. It sort of gets smooth. And my hands are real warm, so that also helps. Seems that my hands are always really warm. I used to have a really hard time icing things because when I hold the piping bag, my hands were always so warm that it would melt some of the icing and it wouldn't pipe really well. All right, we're coming together. So I'm gonna go ahead and knead this for about another 5 minutes or so. And basically I just push it down and give it a turn. This is the same way I do the bread. I don't really have, you know, a technique. I just try to get it all consistent and smooth. And yes, now it really feels like it's starting to come together. You can really feel the difference when it's not dry anymore. So we'll just knead for a little longer. I guess I can't make anything else today because I'm out of discard. Now it's starting to get a little, you can feel like it's not dry anymore. It's starting to get kind of moist again, which means all the flour is incorporated and it's becoming a nice smooth dough ball. Okay, this is looking pretty good. It's nice and smooth. It's been 10 minutes or so, maybe not quite 10 minutes, but it's ready to just make into a little ball. I have my greased bowl right here. And I want you to see this part so you can see how much it raises. So I'm just gonna plop it right in the bowl. You can see how big it is. It won't stick because it's greased. I'll just put my little silicone lid on. You could use saran wrap or whatever. And I'm gonna put this aside for 4 hours or so, and then I'll check it. In my house, it's kind of warm, so probably 4 hours will be enough. You might need to let it rise for 5 until it's nice and puffy. Okay, welcome back. So, it's been about 3.5 hours since I put the dough in here to rise. It's pretty much doubled. I also have to remember to tell you that the salt, I forgot to tell you to add the salt when we were mixing everything together. So the salt goes in when you add the liquid stuff to the flour. So I have my blob of dough here. I'm just gonna take a little bit of my flour and sprinkle it on the counter. I don't need very much. I'm gonna plop my dough out from the bowl and squish it into a kind of a rectangle shape. Okay, now I'll give it a nice roll. And we're gonna make it into a nice big rectangle. I'm not sure if it says on here how thick it's supposed to be or not. Just says where's it at? On a floured surface into a rectangle. It doesn't really say. So we're just gonna roll it out as big as my heart tells me to today, which is probably pretty good there. Make it a little bit thinner. And we'll go this way a little. All right. So now here we go. We're supposed to take the softened butter and just spread it on here. I've experimented a little bit. The first time I did these, I actually took the butter and mixed it in with the cinnamon and sugar. So I spread everything at once, which worked out okay too. You can kind of do it whatever way you want. So I'm just gonna, like I'm buttering a piece of bread, gonna butter this whole thing. And there we go. Now, we'll take the cinnamon and sugar mixture. I mixed this together already. We've got 1/2 cup of brown sugar and 2 tablespoons of cinnamon in this bowl. So I'm gonna just get in here and squish up any clumps of sugar that I feel. I mixed it together and used my fork to kind of break down all the pieces. And then I'm just going to sprinkle this right on here. And you just put the whole amount of the bowl right on here. I usually try to leave a little bit of the front edge here so it has something to grip when I go to roll it up. I've seen people cut them different ways. I've seen them cut it before they roll it and then roll them. And then I've also seen them roll it up and then cut it. And that's the way I usually do it. I haven't really tried the other way where you roll it after you cut it. So then you have to roll 12 times. I feel like this is much faster. So I'm going to take the littler end and just start a tight roll right over the cinnamon sugar, as tight as you can get it. There we go. I'm going to just pinch it a little bit to seal that little seam so it doesn't fall apart when I cut it. I usually kind of even it out after it's in a log. Like that. Okay, then I cut it in half. If you want 12 pieces, actually going to use my bowl scraper for this. And cut it in half. And cut that in half. And then each of these get cut into 3 pieces. This is just kind of eyeballing it. There's no technical way to do this, but I find if I cut it in half and then cut each piece in half, then it ends up working out pretty well for me. Okay, there you go. 4, 8, 12 pieces. Then I'm going to take my pre-greased bowl here. I have a pretty large baking sheet, baking pan. It doesn't really say, it just says baking dish. And I just sprayed some olive oil in the bottom of that. So I'm going to line these up in here, 3 across. The middle ones are a little fatter, but that's okay. They'll just be different sizes, not a big deal. And I'll sprinkle this extra cinnamon and sugar that fell out on the end pieces that don't seem to have quite as much happening there. Now, these won't look like they will fill this container, but they will. Once they sit and rise for a little bit, it says 1 hour to 2 hours, or you can put them, I'm going to take this little guy and put him on the end up here. You can put them in the refrigerator after you get to this point, after you let them sit out for 1 hour or so, and then put them in the fridge overnight, and that works too. And then you can just bake them in the morning if you want. I'm just going to sprinkle what's left of this cinnamon sugar right in there. Don't want to waste it. All right. There we have it. Tomorrow, we will, you know, I might just go ahead and cook these today because they're just as good day old. Actually, these are good for several days and they taste just as good. They are delicious right out of the oven though. If you want, you could sprinkle some nuts on top of there. But these just get baked then at 350 degrees for 25 to 30 minutes after they rise again. They'll get puffy and they'll fill up all the gaps in here. And then you'll know that it's time and you can throw them in the oven. Right. I guess that's it for today. Hope you all are baking something delicious. Bye.